While I buried our son alone, my wife vacationed in Hawaii with her lover. Jacob stood at the front of the church, his hands curled into fists at his sides. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and melting candle wax, a cloying, suffocating fragrance that made his stomach churn. He barely heard the priest's voice, soft, solemn, offering words that meant nothing. He kept his eyes locked on the casket. Small, too small. Noah should have been here, squirming in his seat, fidgeting with the collar of his dress shirt, whispering that he was hungry, that he was bored. Instead, he lay inside that wooden box, buried beneath white roses, trapped in a silence that Jacob could never break. His son, his beautiful, laughing 5-year-old son, gone. And Claire, his wife, Noah's mother, was nowhere to be found. Jacob had spent the past week convincing himself that she was grieving in her own way, that the silence from her phone, her absence from their bed, the hollow space she left in their home, none of it was what it seemed. But then, just an hour before the service, his phone had buzzed. A photo, a message. The image burned into his brain like a brand. Claire, lounging by a pool, cocktail in hand. A man beside her. Close. Too close. Sunlight gleamed off her sunglasses. She was smiling, laughing. The text beneath it had been short, precise. Thought you should see what your wife is really doing today. A concerned friend. Jacob had felt something inside him crack open. She wasn't grieving. She wasn't drowning in sorrow, in guilt, in the unbearable weight of loss. She was celebrating. His grief hardened into something else, something colder. His fingers twitched around the phone as he forced himself to return to the moment. People were watching him. He could feel their eyes, their pity. Neighbors, old friends, strangers who pretended they understood his pain. Mrs. Holloway, their elderly neighbor, sniffled into a handkerchief. The pastor spoke of Noah's laughter, his kindness, his bright little soul. Someone sobbed in the back. Jacob felt none of it. Instead, his mind replayed the message over and over, the words sinking into his bones like venom. What your wife is really doing today. A slow rage uncurled inside him. Claire had left him to bury their son alone. She had abandoned the one person who had loved her unconditionally, the one soul who had deserved so much more. Jacob clenched his jaw, forcing himself to look at the casket again. The polished wood gleamed under the dim church lights. He had chosen white because it felt pure, innocent, like Noah, but nothing about this moment felt right. The universe had made a mistake. His son should be here. Claire should be here. The priest's voice faded, replaced by a suffocating silence. A long pause. Then, gently, would the father like to say a few words? Jacob's throat tightened. His body locked up. Say something. He stood there, frozen, his mind a storm of grief and betrayal. The casket in front of him, the picture on his phone behind his eyes. The stark contrast between the two realities shattered him. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His hands curled at his sides. He shook his head. No. The priest hesitated, then nodded. The service continued. Jacob sat down, staring straight ahead, unmoving, unblinking. The rest of the funeral passed in a blur, soft whispers, distant sobs, hands gripping his shoulder. He barely felt them. And when it was finally over, when the last guest had left and the weight of silence pressed down on the empty church, Jacob exhaled. A long, slow breath. He looked down at his phone once more, at the image of Claire, bathed in sunlight, smiling like she hadn't destroyed everything. His grief had no room for forgiveness. His sorrow had no space for mercy. Claire thought she could leave. She thought she could escape the weight of what she'd done. She was wrong. The house was suffocating. People had come and gone, offering condolences that meant nothing, leaving behind dishes of food Jacob would never eat. He didn't want their casseroles, their pity, or their empty words. He wanted Noah. But Noah was gone. Now, the house was silent. The kind of silence that presses against your chest like a weight, that makes your own breath sound too loud. Jacob stood in the doorway of his son's bedroom, staring into the space where his little boy had once lived, laughed, and dreamed. The walls were still painted in soft blues, lined with shelves of books they used to read together at night. A stuffed bear sat at the foot of the bed, its fur slightly worn from Noah clutching it in his sleep. Everything was still here, everything except him. Jacob stepped inside, the floor creaking beneath his weight. He ran his fingers over Noah's dresser, over the little things that no longer had an owner, a tiny pair of socks, a toy car, a crayon drawing of their family that Noah had once proudly taped to the wall. He swallowed hard. Then, his gaze landed on the desk. Claire's desk. It sat in the corner of the room, neat and untouched. Claire had always been meticulous, keeping everything in order, except for their marriage, except for their son. Something about it nagged at him, a feeling deep in his gut, like a whisper urging him forward. Jacob approached the desk and pulled open the top drawer. Papers neatly stacked, bills, medical records, things he already knew. But then he saw it. A folder labeled in Claire's careful handwriting, policy. His fingers trembled as he pulled it out. He flipped it open, and his world cracked open with it. Life insurance policy. Noah's name was printed at the top, Claire's signature at the bottom. Jacob's breath came in sharp, uneven bursts as he scanned the pages, his eyes catching on the details that made his skin crawl. Claire had taken out the policy 6 months after Noah's diagnosis. She had taken out loans against it. She had amended it to remove Jacob as a beneficiary, weeks before Noah's death. Jacob stared at the ink on the paper, his mind refusing to believe what his eyes were seeing. This wasn't grief. This wasn't mourning. This was betrayal. Claire had turned their son's death into a payout. Jacob's grip tightened on the folder, his knuckles white. His whole body felt like it was burning from the inside out. His wife, Noah's mother, hadn't just abandoned them. She had profited from their son's death. A sound rang through the house, a sharp vibration against the wood of the desk. His phone. Jacob barely registered picking it up, barely heard himself answer. Hello. A voice on the other end. A woman's voice, low and urgent. You don't know me, but you need to listen. It's about Claire. Jacob's pulse hammered. His grip tightened on the phone. Who the hell are you? A pause. Then, the voice came again. My name is Mia, and I know exactly what she's done. The coffee shop was a far cry from the places Claire preferred. No marble countertops, no overpriced lattes, no curated aesthetic to project the illusion of a perfect life. Just scuffed wooden floors, the bitter smell of burnt espresso, and a tired-looking barista who didn't bother to fake a smile. Jacob doubted Claire had ever stepped foot in a place like this. That was part of why he agreed to meet here. He spotted Mia instantly. She sat in the corner, half hidden in the shadows, fingers wrapped around a cheap ceramic mug. Her auburn hair was pulled back into a careless ponytail, a few loose strands falling into her face. She wasn't looking at him, just staring into the depths of her coffee, stirring absent-mindedly. Jacob walked over, each step deliberate. He wasn't here to waste time. She didn't acknowledge him until he slid into the chair across from her. Then, finally, she looked up. Her eyes were sharp, watching, calculating. I didn't think you'd come, she murmured, taking a slow sip of coffee. Jacob dropped a folder onto the table with a dull thud. Inside was everything he had found in Claire's desk. The insurance policy, the bank withdrawals, the cold legal proof that his wife had turned their son's death into a financial transaction. His voice was steady, but his fingers curled into fists beneath the table. You have 5 minutes. Talk. Mia smirked, but there was no humor in it. Just something bitter, straight to the point. I like that. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Your wife's been seeing my ex for over a year. Jacob didn't flinch. I know. Mia arched an eyebrow. Oh, do you? She reached in her coat pocket, pulled out her phone, and slid it across the table. Do you know about the money? About the house they're planning to buy in Maui. The screen was filled with text messages. Dozens of them. Jacob forced himself to read. Claire, the payout came through. More than enough. We'll be out of here by the end of the month. Brandon, Maui's waiting babe. Just don't let him suspect anything. Claire, he won't. He's too broken to see. The words blurred. A roaring sound filled Jacob's ears, drowning out the clatter of dishes, the low hum of conversation around them. He gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. Mia watched him carefully. I found those messages a week ago. That's when I realized what she really was. She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Claire never loved him. She's using him just like she used you. Jacob placed the phone down, exhaling slowly. He wouldn't let anger control him. Not yet. How do I know you're not lying? He asked. Mia let out a dry chuckle. Because I've got nothing left to lose. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Claire doesn't give a damn about either of us. She's moving the money into offshore accounts. She's leaving next week. Alone. A sharp, suffocating silence settled between them. Mia let the words sink in before adding. She was never planning to take Brandon with her. Jacob's grip tightened on the table's edge. Of course, Claire never left loose ends. She's been planning this for months, Mia continued. The insurance payout, the fake documents, the loans. She's setting herself up for a fresh start, a new identity, a new life, and she doesn't care who she destroys in the process. Jacob looked up, meeting Mia's gaze. She wasn't just some scorned ex-girlfriend looking for revenge. She was just like him. Burned, betrayed, ready to make Claire pay. Mia gave him a slow, knowing smile. So, what are we going to do about it? And for the first time in weeks, Jacob felt something other than grief. He felt purpose. Mia's apartment was small, cluttered, and smelled faintly of burnt coffee. A stack of unopened bills sat on the counter, a silent testament to the wreckage Brandon had left in his wake. Jacob sat across from her at the tiny kitchen table, his fingers drumming against the wood as she scrolled through her phone. He's a cocky bastard, she muttered, eyes fixed on the screen. He won't even question why I'm texting him after all this time. Jacob exhaled sharply, forcing himself to stay calm. Everything in his world had shattered in the past 48 hours, and now he was sitting in a stranger's apartment, conspiring against his own wife. His ex-wife. Mia's phone vibrated. She smirked. Told you. She turned the screen toward him. Brandon, didn't expect to hear from you. What's up, babe? Jacob clenched his jaw. Babe. The casual arrogance of it made his skin crawl. Claire had probably called him the same thing. Whispered it in his ear while Noah was dying. Mia typed back. Mia, I miss you. Can we talk? Brandon's response was immediate. Brandon, of course. My place. Jacob met Mia's gaze. They didn't need to speak. It was working. She typed again. Midnight. Just us. A pause. Then the 3 dots blinked. Brandon. See you then. Mia locked the phone and leaned back in her chair. There. Easy. Jacob exhaled, his pulse steadying. I'll be outside. When you get him talking, I'll come in. Mia studied him, tapping a fingernail against her mug. And then what? Jacob didn't answer, because he didn't know yet. Would he beat the truth out of Brandon? Would he put his hands around his throat and squeeze until every last lie fell from his lips? Would he pull the gun from his jacket and press it against his skull just to see the fear in his eyes? He only knew one thing. Brandon wasn't walking away from this untouched. Midnight came like a slow, creeping storm. Jacob waited in the shadows outside Brandon's apartment, the weight of the gun pressing against his ribs. He had tucked it beneath his jacket, just in case. Mia arrived on time, dressed simple, a loose sweater hanging off one shoulder, jeans hugging her frame. Not too revealing, just enough to remind Brandon of what he'd lost. Jacob hated how easily the man would fall for it. From his hiding spot near the side of the building, he watched as Mia knocked. The door opened, revealing Brandon, tall, muscular, and oozing the kind of arrogance that made Jacob's fists itch. Damn, Brandon drawled, leaning against the doorframe. Didn't think I'd ever see you again. Mia gave a small, coy smile. Well, here I am. Brandon grinned, stepping aside. Come in. Jacob moved closer, heart hammering as the door shut behind her. He pressed his ear against the cool metal, listening. Inside, Mia let Brandon pour her drink. She took it, but didn't sip, watching as he settled onto the couch beside her. So, he mused, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. What's this really about? You miss me? Mia tilted her head, letting her fingers graze the rim of her glass. Something like that. Brandon smirked. Too bad. I'm kind of seeing someone. Mia forced a laugh. Oh, I know. She traced a finger down his arm. Claire, right? Brandon tensed, just for a second. Then, he recovered, leaning back with a lazy grin. So you do your homework now? That's cute. Mia's smile didn't waver. She's a real piece of work. Brandon exhaled through his nose. Yeah, she is. He took a sip, his gaze sharpening. But she's smart. Smarter than you. Smarter than Jacob. Mia's nails dug into her palm. She left him, you know. Brandon's grin widened. Yeah, and Mia played the part well, leaning in, dropping her voice to something low and conspiratorial. And she left you too. Brandon's smirk wavered. Mia twisted the knife, took the money, booked the flight. Did you really think she was waiting for you? Brandon scoffed, but the way his grip tightened around the glass betrayed him. Bullshit. Mia leaned closer. Check your bank account. Brandon hesitated. Then, with a frustrated grunt, he pulled out his phone. His expression twisted as he scrolled. His voice was sharp, anger seeping in. That bitch. The glass slammed onto the table, liquid sloshing over the edge. That's when Jacob stepped inside. The door creaked as it swung open, and Brandon's head snapped up. Jacob met his gaze, stepping into the dim light. Brandon's lips curled. You gotta be kidding me. Jacob didn't stop moving. Didn't stop until he was towering over the man who had stolen his wife, his son's memory, his life. Brandon smirked, trying to mask the tension in his shoulders. What? You two best friends now? Jacob's fist flew before he could think. A sharp crack echoed as Brandon's head snapped back, blood spurting from his nose. He barely had time to react before Jacob grabbed his shirt, yanking him forward. You're going to tell me everything, Jacob growled, shoving him against the couch. Or I swear to God. Brandon wiped at the blood dripping from his nose and laughed. Laughed. Oh man. He winced, shaking his head. You really don't get it, do you? Jacob's grip tightened. Get what? Brandon smirked, voice dripping with cruel amusement. Claire played all of us. Silence. Jacob's pulse pounded in his ears. What? Brandon leaned in, eyes dark. She used you for the money. She used me for the exit plan. And guess what? She's already gone. The world tilted. Jacob stumbled back, breath short. Mia stood, face pale. That's not possible. I had eyes on her account. She couldn't have. Brandon laughed again, shaking his head. She was always 2 steps ahead. You really think she'd wait around for either of us? Jacob's vision blurred with fury. Claire was gone, and they were too late. For now, Brandon's apartment smelled like stale beer and cheap cologne. The kind of place where arrogance festered, where lies were whispered between drinks and betrayals were swept under unmade sheets. Jacob had never been here before, but he knew this place. It was where Claire had laughed, had kissed, had planned a life without him. And now, he was here to burn it all down. Brandon sat slumped in the worn leather armchair, a thin trickle of blood snaking down from his temple where Jacob's fist had landed. His cocky smirk was faltering now, but not gone. Not yet. Jacob pressed the barrel of his gun against Brandon's forehead. The metal was cold, unforgiving. Like him. Talk. Brandon licked his split lip, chuckling low. You think I'm scared of you? His voice was hoarse, but the arrogance hadn't left. I know exactly what you are. A sad little man who got played. Jacob's grip tightened on the gun. His finger rested against the trigger, not squeezing, not yet. Brandon exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? His smirk widened, exposing blood-stained teeth. She's already gone. The world tilted. The words were a hammer to Jacob's ribs, knocking the breath from his lungs. Gone? Brandon saw the flicker of hesitation and grinned. He leaned forward just enough that the gun was practically nestled between his brows. She's both of us, man. Me, you, Noah. Jacob saw red. He slammed the butt of the gun into Brandon's cheek. The man yelped, lurching sideways, but Jacob grabbed him by the collar, dragging him upright. Say his name again. His voice was low, dangerous. Brandon groaned, spitting blood onto the floor. His breathing was ragged, but his eyes, they were triumphant. Jacob had been a fool. He had thought Claire was running to Brandon, that they were in this together. But Brandon wasn't her escape plan. He was just another casualty. A bitter laugh rose in Jacob's throat, but he swallowed it down. Claire had never planned on keeping either of them. Brandon sucked in a shaky breath. She played me too. Jacob stepped back. His hand shook, but not with fear, with something deeper, something jagged and raw. Mia. He turned, and there she was, standing near the doorway, watching in eerie silence. She hadn't moved when Jacob threw the first punch, hadn't flinched when the gun was drawn. And now, she wasn't surprised. Jacob's stomach twisted. You knew. Mia didn't deny it. She simply tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Not everything, but enough. His pulse pounded. Mia had let him believe Claire was still with Brandon. Let him believe this was about exposing an affair, about confronting two traitors. But the truth was worse. Claire was smarter than that. She had drained the insurance money, wiped their joint accounts, and vanished. Not to be with Brandon, but to be alone, to be free. Brandon laughed again, broken and bitter. Face it, man. She left you in the dirt. Jacob barely heard him. His mind was spinning, memories crashing together. Claire's empty promises, her forced grief, the way she hadn't cried when Noah died, the way she had left. She had wanted out for a long time. And now, she had finally done it. Jacob turned back to Brandon, his grip tightening on the gun. It would be easy, so easy. One pull of the trigger, and at least one liar would pay for what they'd done. But killing Brandon wouldn't fix this. Because Claire was still out there. Mia stepped closer, voice soft. We can find her. Jacob exhaled slowly, lowering the gun. Claire had destroyed everything, had stolen their son's death and turned it into profit. But this wasn't over. No, this was just the beginning. Jacob had always imagined that grief would dull with time, that after a loss as devastating as Noah's, the pain would slowly soften, its edges no longer sharp enough to cut. He was wrong. Grief had not dulled. It had sharpened into something else, something primal, something hungry. And it had a name, revenge. Jacob sat in Mia's dimly lit apartment, the weight of his discovery pressing down on him like an iron vice. The room smelled of stale coffee and cigarette smoke, though Mia wasn't smoking. She just liked to let the cigarette burn out, watching the tendrils of smoke curl toward the ceiling like ghosts. She sat across from him, legs folded beneath her, her laptop balanced on one knee. She's already on the move, she murmured, scrolling through transaction records with a focused intensity. Jacob's jaw clenched. Where? Mia turned the screen toward him. A set of numbers and locations flashed by, each one another nail in Claire's coffin. A wire transfer, $250,000. Destination, a private account in the Cayman Islands. A flight booked under an alias. Departing LAX. Destination, Maui. A cold chill crawled up Jacob's spine. Maui, the place she had dreamt of escaping to. The paradise she had traded their son's life for. Jacob exhaled slowly. She's hiding there. Mia gave a bitter laugh, shaking her head. Not hiding, waiting. Jacob frowned. For what? Mia locked eyes with him. Her gaze was dark, knowing. For you. The turbulence rattled the plane, but Jacob barely noticed. He sat by the window, fingers curled into fists, staring down at the endless ocean below. The blue stretched out in all directions, peaceful and unbothered. His mind, however, was anything but peaceful. Noah had loved the ocean. He used to press his small hands against the aquarium glass, watching the fish dart through the water with wide-eyed wonder. Look, Daddy, they're flying underwater. Now Noah's gone, and Claire was in paradise, spending his blood money like it had no weight. Jacob closed his eyes. His grief no longer felt like an anchor. It felt like a blade, sharp and gleaming. Beside him, Mia flipped through the documents they had compiled. Claire's financial records, bank statements, proof of her betrayal. She had printed it all out, as if the physical evidence made it more real. "What happens when we get there?" she asked, voice even. Jacob turned to her, his expression unreadable. "We end it." Mia held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. They didn't speak for the rest of the flight. Maui was beautiful, golden sunlight spilling over the swaying palm trees, the scent of salt and hibiscus thick in the air. Tourists moved in lazy, relaxed patterns, their biggest concern being which beach to visit next. But Jacob and Mia weren't here to relax. They stood in the airport's rental car lot, the heat pressing against their skin. Mia held up her phone. Her rental is at a villa up the coast. Secluded, expensive, paid in cash. Jacob gave a humorless laugh. Of course it is. They drove in silence, the highway winding along the cliffs, waves crashing below. Every mile they covered brought them closer to the moment Jacob had been waiting for. The reckoning. The house was exactly what he had expected. Modern, sleek, the kind of place Claire had always fantasized about. The driveway was empty except for a luxury rental car parked beneath the swaying palms. Jacob killed the engine. For a long moment, neither he nor Mia moved. Then, slowly, Mia reached into the glove compartment, pulling out a small revolver. She turned it in her hands, the metal catching the sunlight. Jacob's eyes flicked to it. "Do you even know how to use that?" Mia smirked. "You'd be surprised." Jacob didn't argue. He wasn't sure what this was going to turn into. Confrontation? A confession? Something worse? He stepped out of the car, his pulse steady. The villa door was slightly ajar. Mia noticed it too, her posture tensing. That's not right. Jacob moved forward, slowly pushing the door open. Inside, the house was bathed in golden light, the scent of expensive perfume thick in the air. Claire's perfume. And then, the sound of a wine glass tipping over. Jacob turned the corner, and there she was. Claire, lounging on the white couch, a half-empty glass of red in her hand. Her eyes locked onto his, and instead of shock, instead of fear, she smiled. "Took you long enough," she said. The trap had been set, and Jacob had just walked into it. The ocean stretched endlessly behind her, waves lapping softly against the shore. The villa was stunning, whitewashed walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, an infinity pool reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. It was the kind of place people escaped to, where sins could be washed away in the tide. But there would be no escape for Claire. Jacob stood at the edge of the terrace, the soft sea breeze barely touching the fire burning inside him. Claire was here, in paradise, drinking wine as if she hadn't left behind a grave. She hadn't seen him yet. She was lounging on a cushioned chair, legs stretched out, the stem of her glass dangling from her fingers. A silk robe draped over her shoulders, the kind of luxury she'd stolen from their son's death. From him. Jacob clenched his fists, stepping forward. The moment she noticed him, everything changed. Her body stiffened, fingers tightening around the glass. Her breath hitched. For a second, just a second, her mask cracked, and Jacob saw the raw fear beneath. Then, just as quickly, she smoothed it over. "Jacob," her voice was soft, cautious. "What are you doing here?" A slow, bitter smile curled at his lips. Did you really think you'd get away with it? Claire exhaled sharply, setting her glass down with careful precision. She sat up, back straight, as if bracing herself. I don't know what you think you know. Jacob let out a low, humorless laugh. Oh, I know, Claire. I know about the money, the insurance, the loans. I know you planned this from the moment Noah got sick. She flinched. For once, she didn't have a lie ready. Jacob reached into his jacket and tossed a thick folder onto the table between them. Pages spilled out, copies of the policy, bank statements, messages between her and Brandon. Evidence. Her eyes flicked to the papers, but she didn't move to touch them. Instead, she licked her lips, gaze shifting back to him. Calculating. Listen to me, she said carefully, voice honeyed. This isn't what you think. Jacob tilted his head. No. No. She leaned forward, hands out as if reaching for him. I didn't plan this, Jacob. I was drowning. We both were. The medical bills, the debt. She swallowed, her voice breaking at just the right moment. I made mistakes. She was good. Once, he might have believed her. But now, all he saw was the woman who left her son to die alone while she drank cocktails by a pool. You didn't just make mistakes, he said, stepping closer. His voice was low, steady. You made choices. Claire's jaw clenched. The cracks in her performance deepened. What do you want? Justice. Her eyes darted past him, toward the villa's entrance. She was stalling. Jacob followed her gaze and smiled. Waiting for someone? Her expression shuddered. Jacob, a soft click echoed behind him. The front door swinging shut. Mia. Claire's breath caught. Oh my God. Jacob turned just enough to see Mia step onto the terrace, her expression cold, unreadable. Claire shot to her feet. What the hell is she doing here? She wanted to see you too. Jacob's voice was almost casual. Seems you played both of us. Claire's eyes darted between them. Her mind was spinning, trying to calculate the odds, the angles. How do I get out of this? How do I survive? But there was no way out. Mia stepped forward, tossing her own set of papers onto the table. Brandon's messages, flight receipts, Claire's escape plan in black and white. You never planned to take him with you, Mia said, her voice laced with venom. Just like you never planned to tell Jacob about the money. Claire exhaled sharply, shaking her head. I had to leave. You don't understand. You left your son to die. The words hit like a bullet. Jacob saw it in her eyes, the fleeting moment of real fear. Not for Noah, not for what she'd done. Fear for herself. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Then, in a single, desperate motion, Claire lunged for her purse. Jacob moved faster. He grabbed her wrist, twisting hard. She yelped, the purse falling to the ground, a small handgun clattering onto the marble floor. Mia kicked it away. Jacob tightened his grip, forcing her to look at him. You were going to shoot me? Claire's chest heaved. Aye. Her eyes darted to Mia, pleading, you don't have to do this. Mia didn't answer. Jacob slowly released Claire's wrist, letting her stumble back. For a long moment, he just looked at her, at the woman he once loved, the mother of his child. And all he felt was emptiness. You deserve worse than prison. His voice was quiet. But that's where you're going. Claire's face twisted in horror. Jacob, please. Sirens wailed in the distance. Her eyes widened. Mia had already called them. Claire turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. Jacob watched as red and blue lights reflected off the villa's pristine walls, as officers stormed onto the terrace, shouting commands. He barely heard them. His gaze stayed locked on Claire as she was forced to the ground, wrists yanked behind her, cuffs snapping into place. She struggled, screamed, but it didn't matter. It was over. Jacob exhaled, a weight lifting from his chest for the first time in months. Noah could rest now. And Claire? Claire would rot. The waves crashed below. The sun sank into the horizon. And Jacob finally walked away.